We recently added $1.3 million in new annual recurring revenue, but how did we do that? By building Trust Upstream. 5 steps really helped identify the gold and surface the gold. I'm going to break down those 5 steps in this video and also provide you with the worksheets and the AI prompts that our team uses when we walk alongside the agencies that we serve as predictive clients so that you can take it and apply it. So that's what we're going to cover inside this video. Okay, so let's start with, I'm going to use I'm going to use kind of a story or metaphor throughout. I'm going to tie this back to 1849 gold rush in California and draw the parallel to how we see some agencies approach business development. And maybe not your agency, but how we see some agencies approach business development. So back in 1849, about 300,000 people rushed into, hence the gold rush, rushed into California. And they were, candidly, they were all looking to strike it rich and stake their claim and all of those things. Except what the masses did was they started panning these random riverbeds without really much of a plan. It's not like they were navigating. It's not like they knew exactly where they were going. They're aimlessly wandering. And most of them went broke, and it wasn't because of a lack of effort. I mean, they worked really hard, and it was dangerous work too. But most of them didn't fulfill their sort of vision, dream, fantasy of striking it rich. Most of them failed. But then enter a new type of prospector. That prospector who used science, who used, of course, geology, who used data, who used the best tools, who saw what the others were doing and doing incorrectly or poorly and decided to do something different. And they saw that, the natural bend of the river and the current of the river would deposit the gold in the bends, and then they had the right tools to be able to surface. So once they found the surface gold, then they could go to the next layer, and the next layer, and the next layer, and the next layer. They had the right equipment, they had the right tools at each step in that process to continue surfacing the gold. Okay? So agencies, unfortunately, what we see, who are aimlessly wandering, who are approaching biz dev, sort of like those 49ers, panning random riverbeds, looking for that shiny new prospect, and it doesn't happen. And so then there's the desperation, there's sort of the lack of hope, or, whatever word you want to insert or whatever emotion you want to insert. But it doesn't have to be that way when we follow the right navigational path and use data, because data's on your side, and then being really smart about activating the latent demand that is probably already inside your agency ecosystem. Okay. And that's what we're going to be talking about here, a very specific series of steps that you can use to uncover the gold. We call that map the opportunities, and then being able to sort of create intrigue, curiosity, desire to activate that latent demand. We call that the conversation spark. And then what can you share with one of your prospects who raises their hand? What can you share in advance of the meeting that shares your insights and starts to build trust? Think of it as kind of a trust accelerator. We call that the brief. And then how to run that meeting following a S.P.A.R.K format. And I'm going to break down those 5 pieces within that meeting. And then how to that right next step to do what we call BAM FAM, which is book a meeting from a meeting. And then that steps into the trust architecture. Okay, so lots of terms, I know. I'm going to try to break this down as concisely and linearly as I can, step by step. And then again, the worksheets are available. In fact, let me just say this right now, and I'll try to mention a couple more times here throughout the video so that I don't forget. So if you go to Instagram, if you look me up at Stephen Woessner, just message me the word brief, and then I will package up the worksheets as well as the AI prompts and send that right over to you. Okay, so Instagram at Stephen Woessner, brief, and I'll get you the worksheets and the AI prompts that we use to write Conversation Spark emails and also to build the brief. All right, so where does this fit inside the overall process? So this is the in-demand agency method. If we happen to be meeting for the first time, we really focus on 3 core strategies here at Predictive ROI. So when we work alongside an agency and they want to sell more of what they do so they can reach their goals faster, and they want to be able to do that in the context of, moving from guesswork to growth instead of aimlessly wandering through the wilderness and then being able to reach their biz dev goals faster, 3 core strategies. Grow. We want that agency to be able to own their addressable market. Nurture, so they know who to talk to, when to talk to them, and so forth. And sell, being able to use data and have data on their side so they can win new clients faster, higher probabilities. All right, so what we're focusing on today, and down here at the bottom of Nurture, you can see focus sales efforts on your highest probability prospects, right? There are indicators that there might be some gold there. And following the MTO process, we're not going to go deep into the MTO process here during this video, but I'm going to show you where it is or where it sits in the process. And so then, you can see a little bit more about what we're talking about with the MTO. When we do run the MTO process with agencies, sometimes we put $1 million or more on the board. And I think everybody in the room is really surprised to see that. It's like, oh my gosh, we were sitting on that much latent demand. Yeah. So $1 million or more, that is not uncommon. All right. So let's go back to here and then install an optimized sales process that you control from start to finish. So the 5 steps that we're going to cover today fit within those kind of 2 pieces in the overall in-demand agency method. So I want to share this with you just as sort of some grounding context. We eat our own dog food. So what does that mean? It means that before we teach anything, we've run it through what we call the predictive lab. And sometimes those experiments are great and sometimes they're not. And when they're good or bad, we share that data set with our audience and let everyone know this is what worked really, really well. And this was a dumpster fire. All right. So in full transparency, we share that. So what we're sharing here, these 5 steps, we have run ourselves through it. Before we taught it a few weeks ago, and before we work with clients, predictive clients, on how to build a brief and a conversation spark and all of that, we ran that through the lab. There was proper testing before we ever, teach any of it. Let me show you essentially how to surface the gold. So I'm going to go back to the MTO in just a minute, but I wanted you to see how that kind of fits in step 1 of the process. So you can see there, identify the gold, right? This is essentially identifying the who. Who is going to receive step 2? Who is going to receive the conversation spark email? And you can see here, the email that opens the door and earns the invitation. All right, so what does that mean? Earns the invitation for you to do step 3, which is the brief. Okay, so think again, the brief as your insights document. This is, and I'll share some research data points with you here in just a second from Edelman and LinkedIn. But think of the brief as your insights document, as sharing your perspectives, something interesting, something fresh, maybe even something counterintuitive, maybe even something that challenges their assumptions and really makes you stand out. You're sharing that to create intrigue, curiosity, and desire. The goal here is to activate latent demand. And to do that, you need to show up looking different than anyone else, not sending vanilla contents that is easy to ignore and candidly delete, right? You need to show up with something that is that's smart with your point of view, really setting yourself apart, right? There are plenty of agencies knocking on the door. When you get your brief right, then your prospective client leans in and says, I don't think we've heard that before. We should have a conversation with that agency. That's the power of a really good brief. Okay. And you send that. So first, the conversation spark opens the door. They say, yep, I'd like to schedule a brief with you, a session with you. Then before you actually have the session, you're sending that in advance. Okay. 24 to 48 hours. Let's call that 24 to 48 hours. You're emailing that in advance. Okay. And then in step 4, we're not going to go too deep into this in this conversation, in this video, because it could candidly be a video all by itself. But this is how you run that first meeting. In fact, we've got a really great ebook on the S.P.A.R.K conversation guide. So when you go to Instagram, so when you look me up on Instagram at Stephen Woessner and you send me the keyword brief, then I will make sure that I also include the ebook that one of my business partners, Hannah Roth, wrote on the conversation, on the S.P.A.R.K conversation. So we'll send you the worksheets. We'll send you the AI prompts, and then I will be sure to include the S.P.A.R.K conversation guide so you can see how Hannah has broken that down. And then from that ebook, you'll be able to follow it. Okay, so that's step 4. And then step 5 is book a meeting from a meeting, or BAM-FAM for short. And that's the align and prescribe. And then that's where you're going to be using the focus finder. So we're not going to go through align and prescribe here. We're not going to go through focus finder, but I'm pretty sure, and we'll link this into the description, but like 3 or 4 videos ago, I go high level for trust architecture. And the align and prescribe is the second brick, or the second session in the overall trust architecture. Trust architecture is the sales process that we run here at Predictive ROI, and also what we teach our clients. The first session being the help me understand, second being align and prescribe, third being meet and greet. I know I'm throwing a lot of terms here at you. And in that align and prescribe, we're using a diagnostic that we call the focus finder. So we're going to link all of those things in the description below. And I think we'll even include in the description below a link to where you can download the Predictive ROI focus finder. And the reason why I want you to have that is because I'd like for you to be able to see the focus finder. And then as you're considering how to build your own focus finder, then you could use ours as a guide, essentially. Okay. All right. Let me just do a quick double check here. Okay. So that's at a high level, the steps. And what we're going to be focusing on here, these 2 pieces at depth in this video. Okay. All right. So let me just give you a high level sort of run through of the MTO. This is what we're talking about, and looking for opportunities with warm leads, lost leads, past clients, missed opportunities, proposals that said no, leads that ghosted you. Now, on the surface, you might be, when I just said that, you might be like, for Pete's sake, like rolling your eyes at me. I promise you, when we have peeled back these layers, past leads, people you met at trade shows or events, and those conversations didn't go anywhere, or those conversations you didn't follow up on, or those conversations that you didn't move to schedule, or whatever. There are so many missed opportunities. There's so much latent demand that the typical agency is sitting on. Again, it's not uncommon that we put $1 million on the board when we run the MTO for a new Predictive ROI client. So please don't just dismiss this of like, oh, there's no opportunity. We've squeezed all the juice out of that piece of fruit. I'm telling you, there's more. And peeling back those layers. Now, you don't have to quantify that. Maybe at this stage, all that you do is you make a list in each of those categories of the who in each of those categories, and you don't put a dollar number to it, okay, or a dollar amount to it, fine. Just build the list of who. This is your lowest hanging fruit. This is your latent demand. And these are the people, these are the prospects who are going to receive your Conversation S.P.A.R.K email, okay? So at the minimum, just do that. Think of it as you're building an email list. Okay. And you may already have that done. And if so, yay. Let's lean a little bit more into the Conversation S.P.A.R.K. This is the email that you're going to send. And this is where the worksheets and the AI prompts that I had mentioned to you before. And so whether you use Claude or ChatGPT, whatever your particular, tool is of preference, all good. Hannah on my team. So not only is she my business partner alongside Eric Jensen, the 3 of us own the business together, but Hannah is also our chief strategy officer, and she's pretty darn good at writing AI prompts. Okay, so let's go into the Conversation S.P.A.R.K. And what it's designed to do is to ignite demand and to open doors. Okay, so that is the key. And you're going to see that the Conversation S.P.A.R.K. follows a 6 sort of ingredient framework, if you will. And then we're going to look at an actual email here, an actual Conversation S.P.A.R.K, that we have permission from our client, London agency. So John Emerson, if you happen to be watching this, thank you very much for your permission to be able to share your Conversation S.P.A.R.K in full transparency here. I'm going to walk through the 6 ingredients, and then I'm going to show you the full email, and I'm going to be doing kind of a back and forth, and hopefully I don't make you nauseated by doing that, but I just want you to see like this ingredient, this is how it shows up. This ingredient, it shows up here so that you can see it. And it's a very linear flow, ingredient 1 down to 6 in the email and so forth, but I want you to be able to see it. And then also brace yourself. The email is not short. Okay, so again, you might look at that and go, oh, for Pete's sake, I don't want to send a long email like that. And, but again, most of the other agencies that are competing for that same prospective client, they're sending shorter things, quippy things, trying to sound funny, trying to this or that. This email is, you're going to see that it demonstrates, it shows your smarts. It shows your smarts without sounding self-aggrandizing of, oh, look how smart we are. It creates intrigue, curiosity, and desire. And the way that it's formatted, your prospective client's going to look at that and say, huh, this feels different. Okay. And that's what you want. All right. So let's go into, again, the conversation spark. And so this kind of runs in a linear way. The time-bound authority frame, you're going to see that in the first ingredient. The misdiagnosed tension. Over here on this side, this is the constraint. Then the withheld solution. Then the briefing, where there's an invitation to the briefing that you would like to have the briefing. And then you're going to earn that invitation with a permission request. Now, the point that I want to highlight here is the withheld solution, because you're actually not going to see that in the email, which sounds a little bit weird because I was sort of setting up the 6 ingredients you would see. And now I'm telling you, ingredient number 4, you're not going to see. And here's why. I think the typical sort of lead gen email is we've got this thing and and it fixes this problem. And then this is, the solution to, all of the woes that are going inside the business. And then, hey, can we schedule some time to talk about the solution that we just named, 2 sentences ago? That's not what the conversation spark is. The conversation spark withholds the solution. It withholds the solution. Now, do we do that on every single email that we send that is, biz dev related? No, there are certainly some of our biz dev related emails that we share with our audience that are very specific. Some for Sprint, some for Atlas, some for Core, other things that we do, or the things that we do here in order to help agencies. Yes, we do send some that are very specific about a particular thing within the right cadence and part of the overall kind of content calendar, if you will. But something like this is withholding the solution because, again, you're trying to create intrigue, curiosity, and desire with your latent demand. And if you include the solution, you actually make yourself easier to say no to, because then they'll just assume, we're good there. I don't need any of that. All right. So that's why you withhold it. Instead, you want to schedule a brief. All right. Okay. So now we're going to go back and forth to the email. All right. The subject line is private invitation from London agency. Pretty simple and very straightforward subject line. The goal is not to be super creative or cute here. The goal is to just be, direct and to the point. So a private invitation from London agency. All right. Now you can see that it starts off with, my name is Roxy. Roxy is a real person. She's not an AI agent. Roxy works on our team, the predictive team. She is our world-class setter. She orbits a distant moon of awesome. She's incredible. And so when our clients, our predictive clients, Roxy sent this because she's part of our team. Roxy sent this on behalf of John. So then she is part of John's team and then part of other clients' teams because she is sending out the conversation sparks on behalf of our clients. Okay, so just a little bit of context there. All right, so my name is Roxy and I'm part of the team here at London Agency. And that's also a transference of credibility to John. Oh, John has a Roxy. John has somebody reaching out on his behalf. Huh, okay. So that adds a little bit of sort of gravitas, if you will. That might sound ridiculous, but it kind of does. All right, or it kind of does add gravitas, not kind of does sound ridiculous, or at least I hope it doesn't sound ridiculous. All right, and then John Emerson copied here. So on every spark that Roxy sends, she sends that out copies John. All right, and then here, over the past several months, John and our team have been spending time with government relations, public affairs, throughout the Asia Pacific region, includes recent private briefing with former Health Minister Greg Hunt. Okay, that is the time-bound authority frame. That is this ingredient right here. Time-bound authority frame right there. All right, so this is that time-bound authority frame. So then this is the misdiagnosed tension. Maybe this will keep me from having to bounce back and forth by doing it this way. And then this here is the constraint. And I'm pretty sure when we send If you ask for the worksheets and the AI prompts, I'm pretty sure this email is a part of it. If you look me up on Instagram at Stephen Woessner, message me brief, I'll make sure that you get the worksheets, the AI prompts, Hannah's S.P.A.R.K conversation guide, and I will make sure that you get the London agency conversation S.P.A.R.K email. So these are the first three ingredients, right? So 1, 2, 3. And then you'll remember what I mentioned or if you remember what we were just talking about with the withhold the solution. It's not in here. There's no solution in here. Okay, so then number 5. So number 4 is invisible. This is number 5. This is the briefing. You're offering them a briefing. Now, maybe a caution here. When we first started teaching this, when we first rolled this out to the field, what we saw some agencies do, because we taught a workshop on this, I think it was on February 18th. Anyway, what we saw some agencies do is send the conversation S.P.A.R.K. They booked a meeting, and then when they got into that conversation, instead of delivering the brief that the prospective client is expecting, they went right into pitch mode. And as you might imagine, that felt like total whiplash in context with the prospective client. They're like, wait a minute, I'm here to learn something from you, not get pitched. I thought there was a brief. And so then obviously that did not go very well. So this email, a really, really great conversation S.P.A.R.K email, is going to define what you're going to walk through. So I want you to think of that in sort of like 2 perspectives. One, it's great for the reader. It's great for your prospective client because it shows them what they're going to learn and why that's important. And I'm going to, again, go to some data points here in just a second to kind of affirm why that's important. And 2, again, candidly, it's going to be a constraint for you. It's going to force you to stay on point, to stay on agenda. There's going to be an opportunity. If you do this with excellence, there's going to be an opportunity for you to move that to the next stage in the sales process, which is align and prescribe, to use your focus finder. It's not this meeting, right? This is the brief. This is how you earn the invitation, which is ingredient number 6, and that's here. May I have your permission to email you some days and time or daytime options so we can schedule a brief with John? That is number 6. Then that is the earned invitation. So, okay, that is sort of the anatomy, if you will, of a conversation S.P.A.R.K email. When you get the worksheets, you'll be able to fill out the worksheet in the 6 different sections and then be able to follow the AI prompt, which is going to take the worksheet. You're going to take the worksheet, put it into ChatGPT, let's say, and then you're going to add the prompt, and GPT is going to take the prompt, run it against the worksheet, and then you'll have a draft of a conversation S.P.A.R.K. Okay, so 86% of today's B2B decision makers remain hidden. They're hiding behind sort of the curtain. They're laying in the weeds. You don't even know they're there until they raise their hand and say, I'd like to have a conversation with you about X. Okay? So what they really want to be, aside from, not really what they want to be, as you can see here, I should also say, this is coming from Edelman and LinkedIn. This is a partnership between them and this research partner or project, hidden buyers value thinking that informs or even challenges their perspectives. Not being rude, not being contrarian or offensive, maybe contrarian, provocative, not offensive, right? Bold, perspective shifting ideas earn their attention. Thought leadership is a way to impress. So let's come back over here. Fresh perspectives and ideas that challenge assumptions, not just validate their thinking on a topic. Your conversation S.P.A.R.K email needs to create intrigue, curiosity, and desire. How do you do that? By offering up fresh perspectives and ideas that challenge assumptions, okay? Challenge assumptions. That does not mean you challenge assumptions in a self-aggrandizing way, pounding your chest and talking about how great you are. That's not this. That should never be part of it, okay? Instead, it's what can you share that is smart? And that's why your brief is your insights document. The conversation S.P.A.R.K email knocks on the door opens the door with hard to reach prospects because it creates intrigue, curiosity, and desire. And then it tees up the briefing, the session. Okay, so this is what at a high level the brief looks like. So I'm going to include the predictive ROI brief. Now, a caveat here. When you see the predictive ROI brief, you're going to see the gaps and then a recommendation. You're going to see gap 1, recommendation 1, gap 2, recommendation 2, gap 3, recommendation 3. Yours are going to be different than ours. Okay, so when you see our brief in gap 1 and recommendation 1, gap 1 meaning agencies sell too soon and they should have a visual diagnostic, and then recommendation number 1 is, build a focus finder. That is not me telling you or saying to you or suggesting to you that gap 1 and recommendation 1 should be telling your clients to have a focus finder or your prospects to have a focus finder. Okay. I only want you to look at our brief as a guide, sort of a context and content guide, context guide, not content guide. Okay. Your gaps and recommendations are going to be completely different than ours. I just want you to see the format. Okay, that's it. Okay, so let's go back so you can see that here we're outlining gap number 1. First, there's a narrative as to what the problem is. And again, for us, that is an 80% win rate for agencies. We want to help them win 80% of the time as opposed to the 25 to 30% of the time that is typical. And so in order to accomplish that, we need to fill in certain gaps, and we do that by recommendations. But first, we need to identify what the gaps are. So you can see there's gap 1 here, there's gap 2 over here, and then there's going to be gap 3 here. Then with each of the gaps, there's a corresponding recommendation number 1, and then again, recommendation number 2, and then recommendation number 3. So a good linear flow. So again, the overarching goal of your brief is it is your insights document. So don't worry that it doesn't need to look visually like ours. By following the worksheet that you can request that we're going to send to you, by following the worksheet, it's going to work you through each of these specific pieces, and you're going to answer the questions in the worksheet. Then you're going to take the worksheet along with the AI prompt, the GPT or Claude prompt for the brief. You're going to take that along with the worksheet content, put that into your particular tool of choice, and then that's going to help create then the brief for you to be able to use. So this is the S.P.A.R.K conversation guide that I mentioned before, and let's go through what that acronym breaks down as. So the S stands for set the frame. This is where you're going to establish your authority and explain the purpose of the meeting. And again, there's a little bit of a script that Hannah has prepped for you inside the ebook. And then the present the insight. This is where the brief sits. This is where you're introducing the perspective shift that the conversation S.P.A.R.K is making sound interesting, intrigue, curiosity, and desire, right? So when you send the conversation S.P.A.R.K email, you're inviting somebody to a brief, you're earning that invitation backward, and then they say yes to that. You're providing them the brief before the actual session. And when you're in the session, you're presenting the insight. That is the P in that acronym. During that conversation, you're asking diagnostic questions. When we do that well, that reveals the strategic gap so that somebody can start to see what their current state is. Your prospective client can see, well, this is what our current state is. This is what our future state or desired state is. Current, desired. There's a gap now in between. Your agency is the bridge to fill that gap. Now, resist the temptation to sell. Once you've revealed the gap, that isn't the, boy, do we know how to fix it, right? Because that is not going to feel awesome for your prospective client, all right? Then it's resist the temptation, introduce the focus finder in the next session. This is where you run the align and prescribe, okay? I hope that was helpful. So let's do a quick review here. So this is the one that we were looking at earlier. So map the opportunities, gave you some highlights there, dissected the conversation of S.P.A.R.K as well as the brief, the gaps, and the recommendations. Worksheets and the AI prompts that we have that I want to send your way are going to help you build both of these assets to surface the gold. Then, as I mentioned, I'm going to share with you the S.P.A.R.K Conversation Guide, the ebook that Hannah wrote and so forth. And then Bam Fam, book a meeting from a meeting. Again, we're going to link the video in the description, but if you go back to, I think it was like agency sales process, maybe would have been the title of that video. We're going to link to it so you can go back and get a little bit more context, if you will, around the trust architecture, and hope that is helpful. So again, I've probably said it a bazillion times during this video. Go to Instagram at Stephen Woessner, send me a message with the word brief, and then I will make sure that you get all of these things. I'll package them up and get them over to you straight away. And I hope that that is helpful for you to open doors with hard to reach prospects and surfacing the gold, making sure that there is gold there and then surfacing it with the right tools. Until next time, onward with gusto.